It's Sunday. Sunday is a day of rest for me. Sabbath day. I think it should be for everybody. However, I actually do what could be perceived as work on a Sunday. And so I wanted to explain what that really means for me, what I actually do, and why I actually consider this part of my Sabbath because what is actual like work or a task, a to-do list item that I need to do is actually a refresher for me. It's a reflection on who I am, what I've done, and what I need to do to change that. And so, the proper way to do that, I've found, is to be in a place of rest when you can reflect. So, one of my one of my goals actually for this month is to practice a better Sabbath, and I'll talk about that during this call a little bit. But I wanted to start off by showing you the actual app that I use to keep track of my progress with all of my goals. Now, this is a pretty sophisticated app. I've got it brought up on my Vibe board here, and what I have in here is all of my long-term goals. So my long-term goals stretch out 12 months. So I have goals related to my body, related to my being, related to my balance, related to my business. And I'm going to show you those here in a second. But on Sundays, what I like to do is being a place of rest, be in a state of rest, is what I should say. And what that means is I'm just relaxed, I'm calm, I can take a deep breath, I can have no outside interruptions, and I can reflect. Now, the app gets integrated here in a very good way, in a meaningful way, because what it allows me to do is see everything that I've documented about what I really want in life. I've already taken time to do my annual planning, my quarterly planning, my monthly planning, my weekly planning. All those things happen at different intervals. I've talked about those before. I help teams do that. I help companies do that. I help individuals do that. But now is just the weekly check in. And just like on all of those other meetings that you have, whether they're with yourself or you're with a team of people in your business doing them, you have to be in a state of rest, which in most cases at least means no outside distractions. You need to have calm. You need to be focused on, sometimes focused on nothing in a sense, because when you're focused on nothing and you're just being still, you have, in my experience, that's when really God can really talk to you when you're ready to listen, right? You can't have chaos in your life and be prepared to listen. So you have to be able to put yourself in an environment, first of all, where you can actually get that. So, how do you do that? Well, number one, I just want to recognize that it's really, really hard to do that, right? You have to own that space. You have to prioritize that space from a time perspective and from a location perspective. The reason why it's on my list to practice a better Sabbath is just to recognize that it is hard. It's very difficult for me. And the reason why I'm able to do a video today is because I have some things working in my favor that are allowing me to step away today and have more time. Because one, my wife and one of my daughters is at a horse show that I couldn't go to this week, and they won't be back till later this afternoon. And two, my other two daughters were with me all of last week, and now they've gone back to their moms this morning. So I was able to get rid of all the distractions. That's not always the case. Last Sunday, for example, was just picking up. My two daughters and Amanda and Bristol were also here. So I had to make time. So this doesn't look perfect and ideal every single Sunday. It just doesn't. Today, I'm going to be able to go a little bit slower. I have the ability to do that. Last week, I had to go a little bit faster, admittedly rush through it a little bit. But what I'll stop and just say right there is doing this to some level versus a perfect or ideal level is better than not doing it at all. There's some days where I don't even get this done on a Sunday, and it irritates me because I'm so used to doing it. And sometimes I need to take my Monday morning and get it done there. Part of that reason is I've learned to not schedule meetings for myself on Monday mornings, just in case I'm in that situation where I can't step away on a Sunday, and it'll allow me to do my reflection and planning on Monday morning just as a backup plan. Right? But here I am Sunday, and I'm going to walk through with you what I actually do. So first of all, I want to recognize that if you don't have a long-term plan, 12 months, and there's even, go beyond that, but that's not for this case. If you don't have a long-term plan, then what are you really reflecting on? You're going to be kind of daydreaming a little bit. That's what I found. If I ever do find myself, like before I became a true follower of Christ, I used to look for this, like, quote unquote spiritual time. I might go for, a hike or something like that, and it would be very peaceful and really relaxing, and I might think about some things that I want to do. And the reality was I never really did any of that stuff. I would have these experiences that were calming and relaxing, and that was great, and they would recharge me. But then they would recharge me just to go to work on Monday for somebody else. So it wasn't until I got connected with God and my purpose in life where I was really able to set some goals for myself, and then using a system, in this case it's an app I'm going to show you, to help keep myself on track. So what this app does, it's literally, you could have this on a piece of paper. This app, when I first started into this coaching program that I use, this mastermind group, it was all on paper, and I would write it, and then it got to where I would write it in a tablet and digitize it and things like that. Look, you don't need an app to do this. You just need to write down some goals for yourself, right? That's the point. So where am I starting with my weekly reflection? First of all, I found my location. I found myself some quiet space, no distractions. Now I'm going in, and I'm literally going in and saying, what did I say I was going to do? All right, so this page here, you probably can't read it all, right? But what I've got here is I've got my monthly goals up here, and there's 4 things. There's 4 things in each key area of my life, my body, being, balance, and business. So I'm looking at a holistic view of my life. And the first thing I'm saying is, how is my body doing? How am I doing physically? So I have 2 things here. I have a long-term goal, which is written down here, and I have a short-term goal, which is written up here. And this is the beauty of it. I don't need to spend a lot of time here in the long-term goal. I'm just reminding myself, hey, this is what you really want. This is something that I came up with when I took days of reflection one time a year to truly decide what I want for myself. So I'm reminding myself, this takes a minute, guys, not even a minute. And then this other plan, this is my monthly plan, is practical ways to put me in alignment with my long-term goals. So the things I wanted to do in my body, for example, this month, I wanted to go to Iron Tribe 3 times a week. That's my gym, personal training program. 2, I wanted to practice mobility 5 times a week. So I have a specific mobility frame or protocol that I follow that coincides with the gym. 3 is to test ketone and Feel Free. These are 2 supplemental drinks that I'm trying. And 4 is to monitor my blood pressure. I'm trying to get my blood pressure down. I've been working on that since I was in the hospital last year. These are practical ways that if I do these things, these are the most important things, and they're more habitual, meaning establishing habits or doing consistent fundamental things. So think about the idea of a lead indicator. What is the thing that I need to look at doing now in order to get the result that I really want later? So the body for me is always the easiest way to explain to somebody. If you have a goal to meet a certain weight, let's take weight loss, for example. If you do, let's say you're going from 200 pounds to 175 pounds. Well, you're not going to meet your goal by stepping on the scale every day. That's a lagging indicator or a lagging metric. It's the result based. But you might have a long-term goal. Your long-term goal is that 175 number. But what you're actually going to do month to month is going to be very similar to what I did. It might be like go to the gym 3 times a week. So let's monitor the leading indicator on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis and see how we're doing there. And then we're gonna take a deeper reflection on this maybe once a quarter and say, okay, were the leading indicators, the things that I thought were gonna lead me to my long-term result, were they actually working? So I'm not doing that today. Not doing that today. I will do that later at a different time. I do it monthly. I want people that I coach to at least do that quarterly. All right. But today I'm like, what did I do last week? Did I go to the gym 3 times? Check. Yes, I did. Did I do my mobility 5 times? Check. Yes, I did. So on and so forth. And then how am I doing? How is that working? How do I feel about it? Then I'm in a place and I'm able to reflect and I'm going to say, did I do it or didn't I do it? Yes or no? So I'm going to go through that with each individual one. So this app in of itself, we actually have something here called the General's Tent. It's actually a series of questions that walks you through basically what I just described, and it asks you, what adjustments do I need to make? So the reason we do this is because if you do this every week, you can't get that far off track. If you're truly committed to your long-term goals, you can't get that far off track. And you might say, well, why doesn't this work for some people? What I've found is that the reason this doesn't work for people is 2 things. One is you're not doing the work and you're not making adjustments. Second is your long-term goals just aren't clear. Both of these things can be fixed. The reason why is because you have to understand, did you set the right long-term goals? And you might ask, well, I can't just be changing my long-term goals all the time. Look, if this is if this is a new thing for you, I am totally okay with you changing your long-term goals. And that might sound counterproductive because you'd be like jumping all over the place with your direction in life. No, actually what's happening is you are learning the process of actually getting good at setting goals. There should be a feeling, a level of feeling base inside of your planning. How do you know? You can't know unless you do these weekly reps of checking in with yourself. That's why doing the reps is actually more important than the actual goals that you have set. Right? So that's why a lot of times when, let's say I'm working with a team and we're setting up, we were doing like an EOS where we're doing a long-term plan and then we're trying to break it down into quarterly, monthly, and so on and so forth. I'm actually not concerned about what their long-term plan is because it usually changes. Very rarely is somebody completely dialed in to their long-term plan. And even if they are, I'll be like, okay, that's great, but just be open to the fact that this might change. Because the reps of doing the work unlock bigger things. So, how do I know this? Well, I know this from the reps. Okay, what you see right here and what I'm doing today, I've been doing this since 2018. Five years, coming up on 5 full years of doing this every single week. Doing annual plans every single year. Doing quarterly plans every single quarter. Doing weekly plans every single week. You're talking hundreds of reps here just on the weekly plan. And you say, well, Phil, what have you gotten from that? Well, I can't even go into the depths of what I've got from that. But truly going through this and truly being connected to God through this has caused me to make 2 major shifts in my life. The first one was quitting my job. starting a business. Another one is revamping my business, which I'm doing right now. And none of that would have happened if I didn't go through this process. But what happened was I started doing this. I was working for somebody else. I started doing this. And after weeks and weeks and weeks of doing a couple quarterly plans, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, wait a second. I'm talking about my business goals. And for business, it just means your money, your financial situation. You don't have to own a business to go through a process like this. But as I went through the reps, I realized that my dreams and aspirations from a business and money perspective weren't aligned with what I was doing. I was looking at my job and going, wow, am I really going to be able to get to where I want to get to in the time period that I want to get there? And I just was like, wow, no, there's just no way. And so after several months of getting irritated with myself through this process, again, the irritation caused the action, which is a good thing. That allowed me to think deeper and deeper and deeper and finally come to the realization that, you know what? The most important thing, I should say, that I can do in order to get where I really want to go ended up being to quit my job. And I had to wrestle with that for a while because I didn't have like the backup plan. And that's what's crazy about this, because I have a 12-month set of goals here for each one of these. And if I went into my business one, there was literally a money goal there. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. And at first thought, you might think, well, that's really stupid. Why would you have a plan that you don't have the plan, that you don't have the steps for? This is the big thing here. This is the big thing to look for here. If you have a plan, if you have a step-by-step plan, it's not a big enough goal. It's not a big enough dream. And for sure, you're not allowing God to have an impact on your goal. Look, if we can do it all ourselves, that's just going me, 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 me. Like, I'm strong enough, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough. No, that's not really how God works. God wants to be involved. He actually wants to do most of the work for you. So I've learned over the years, and again, this is with reps, people. This is with reps. I have to set a plan that's going to stretch me. I have to set goals that are going to stretch me. And so as I'm doing my weekly reflection, I'm going, well, how did I do on A, B, C, D, and E? And I'm also going and saying, how did I let God work in my life this week? That's why I have a being goal. The being is my spiritual connection. So I step over into the being realm and I go, how am I doing with God this week? I do it every day. I check in with God. I talk to God, so on and so forth. I read the Bible. I pray. I meditate. This is taking a bigger step back, and it's just saying, hey, let me look at my actual relationship with God. Let me look at how I'm living my life to glorify God, to lead others to God, and so on and so forth. So I step from body, I go to my being, I then go to my balance. How am I doing with my family? I've got goals for my family and everything like that. I'm the leader of my family. But how am I doing? This is what I do every week. I check back in and I go, take a step back and be like, all right, how are me and Amanda doing? Are we spending enough time together? How did last week go? How am I doing with Bristol? How am I doing with Dagny? How am I doing with Lulu? Once I check those boxes and say, and I'm good, I can move on to others. But I'll stay in my balance quadrant, and I'll say, if things aren't going good with Amanda, I have to think a little bit deeper and say, okay, what is one thing I need to do differently next week? Yes, I have these goals and everything, but like, Is there something in my mind? Is there something in my attitude? Maybe I'll even be able to go over into my business and say, you know, I spending a little bit too much time at work this week, and that's kind of stressing me out. And that's actually feeding into some issues and how I acted. Maybe I got short. Maybe what have you. You have to look at yourself. That's why it's healthy to do this every week, because if I do it every week, I can't get that far off. Stepping into the business, finally, business is last, right? Because all these things feed into my availability to be present and to be focused in business. And I look at my business last, so how am I doing with my business goals? And this is where I spend the majority of my time during the 5-day work week. So I don't need to spend a lot of time. And we go deeper in this app I use. We have this function called the door. So we set one main target for the week. And it looks like this. Again, you can't see a lot of it, but I have one main goal with 4 key pieces to it. And then I have 20 pieces. These are like things I want to do, like taskless items, very practical things. So now I can sit here on Sunday and say, all right, did I do all these things this week? Yes or no. Some things I might have finished 80% of the way. And then I'll come up with what are the next pieces that I need to do to really get this thing across the finish line if I didn't do it. All of this is in alignment with my monthly goals, my quarterly goals, my annual goals. So again, if I come in here and I didn't do any of this, I really got to check a deeper thing. Like, am I even planning properly? Am I having trouble managing and staying focused on my day? Those are deeper questions. So, like, for example, if we have 20 things we're trying to get done, were those 20 random things, or were they 20 things that were really focused on my longer term goals? And so if I'm getting 19 out of 20, I'm going to be super successful. I know this, right? Because I know I'm good at the planning, and I know if I get these things done, that everything's in alignment. If I only get 5 out of 20, then I'm taking a bigger step back and looking at the bigger picture of, like, do I have other things that are off that are influencing my inability to get things done? Now, this is a lot of stuff to think about. There's a lot to this. You have to have goals, and you have to spend time reflecting on those goals. So if you don't have anything like this, my recommendation would be to schedule yourself some time and then actually do it. Literally put it on your calendar. You're going to be successful at coming up with a long-term plan and executing a plan if you actually can establish the discipline of setting yourself time apart to reflect and to plan. There's no point in going and having a one full day meeting with yourself, or day of reflection, whatever, and coming up with all these goals and stuff if you don't have the discipline to spend time every week, every day, working towards those things. So if you can create the habit, if you could do this 4 or 5 weeks in a row, if you could do this 4 or 5 days a week on a smaller daily level, then you might have the ability to actually get stuff done. I'll close by this. I had all kinds of plans to start my own business. I had all kinds of ideas when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. I remember coming back from a vacation. This was a few years before I started my own business. It was the furthest in depth I ever went at starting an own business in my head. I had a full week sitting on a beach thinking through things, and I came back so motivated that I'm like, I'm doing it this time. I set time aside. I read business book, How to Start a Business. I started going through financial models. Boom, 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 boom. And it finally got to the point where I was like, wow, this is going to be really hard. I analyzed the crap out of it. I said, this is going to be really hard. I had this detailed plan and said no. And I was like, okay, went back to work, went back to my day job. Because I missed what was the next step. I was skipping steps. I was trying to come up with an entire plan on how to meet this impossible goal, this impossible dream that I had of starting my own business, having freedom in my business, in my money. I kept thinking 50 steps ahead and going, that's too hard. Finally had to realize that the decision that I had to make was only the next one. It was only the next one. And for me, that ended up quitting my job. For some of you, that might be just setting aside some time to give yourself reflection. So think about that. Do you really know what you want in life? Are you really happy with how you are? Do you even look at yourself in these 4 different areas? Do you even care? Maybe you don't care, right? But I surely do. Obviously, to go through this level, and today I just wanted to share that with everybody. Like, this actually makes my life easier. It might sound complicated, but this makes my life easier because every day I get up and have all this chaos going on in my life. This simplifies things down for me to get me to say, oh, man, I know there's 100 things that I really need to do, but let me just understand the priorities and focus on the next thing. I'll do that today, and I'll save the next thing for tomorrow, and I'm not going to stress about it.